I came back home without warning. After completing my final mission, I discovered that my son was agonizing alone in the intensive care unit. Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law was out partying with her friends on a yacht in the Gulf of Mexico, so I froze all the accounts immediately. An hour later, she went crazy when she found out. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story reaches. I stepped into Miami International Airport just as the sun began to rise, its golden light streaming through the terminal's glass windows. My old military suitcase, worn at the corners, rested at my feet like a faithful companion of more than 40 years. On my wrist, my father's pocket watch vibrated slightly every time I moved, reminding me of the promise I had made in my youth: always come back home. That promise weighed heavier than ever now. At 61, newly retired after my last mission, I had given my entire life to the United States Marine Corps. From hostage rescue operations in Houston to endless days evacuating civilians during devastating disasters in South America, my career had been nothing but service. But today, I just wanted to be a mother. Anxious to hold Michael, my son, again after so many years, I dragged my suitcase out of the baggage claim area with the same speed and precision as always. Outside, the morning sun was already burning. I raised my hand to hail a cab, climbed inside, and told the driver, 420 Palm Street, please. I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside, emotion struck me like the crashing waves of the nearby sea. I pictured Michael opening the door with a radiant smile, sitting down at the table and talking about everything I had missed. In just half an hour, I would be on my way to see him. The radio was on, reporting news about the Navy, updates I used to hear daily, but now they meant nothing to me. Just yesterday, I had concluded my last assignment as a strategic advisor for NATO during an anti-terrorism operation in South America. 40 years of career, from stopping arms smuggling at the border to sleepless nights in the jungle, were now just distant memories. I looked out the window in silence. The endless blue ocean stretched out, the waves glimmering as if trying to pull me back into those old days. But my mind was only with Michael and the little house where I had poured so many dreams. The cab turned onto the familiar coastal road where the palm trees swayed just as they had the day I left. But when it stopped in front of Michael's house, my chest tightened. The house was dark, curtains drawn, not a single light on. Dragging my suitcase onto the porch, a sharp unease grew inside me. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed in the silence. No response. I knocked harder. Again. Nothing. A strange silence, as if the house had been abandoned. I went down to the garden and looked around. The mailbox was stuffed with crumpled letters, papers scattered along the walkway as if no one had cleared them in a long time. My heart raced. A dark premonition pressed on my chest. I had been sending money punctually to Michael and Melissa, my daughter-in-law, to support the family. I believed everything was fine, that my son was living without problems. But now, standing before that cold house, I wondered what was truly happening. At that moment, I saw Mrs. Thompson, Michael's neighbor, watering flowers across the street. She had lived here since I was a young woman, always kind, always sharing stories about the neighborhood kids. I shouted, "Mrs. Thompson." She lifted her head, her eyes wide with surprise. "Catherine, my God, you're back. But you haven't heard anything, have you?" I hurried across the street, my legs trembling at the sound of her voice. "What? Where's Michael?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from breaking. Mrs. Thompson set down her watering can, compassion flooding her eyes. "Michael's been at St. Mary's Hospital for 2 weeks. The ambulance came at midnight. I saw the logo clearly on the side of the vehicle." Her voice dropped lower. "And Melissa? My son told me he saw one of her posts on social media. She's out on a yacht in the Gulf of Mexico, partying." I froze, as if the ground beneath me had collapsed. Michael in the hospital? 2 weeks? And Melissa, the daughter-in-law I had trusted to care for him, was celebrating on a yacht? I felt the blood drain from my veins, my heart pounding with painful stabs. "Do you know where St. Mary's Hospital is?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Mrs. Thompson nodded and gave me directions. Without thinking, I rushed back to the street and hailed another cab. "To St. Mary's Hospital, as fast as you can," I ordered the driver. Dozens of questions crowded my mind. What had happened to my son that required an emergency admission? And Melissa, how could she be celebrating a luxury party while my son lay sick in a hospital? Sitting in the cab, I felt my chest burn. I gripped my father's pocket watch so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Michael, my son, the boy who once ran behind me on the beach, who hugged me every time I returned from long deployments, was now in a hospital. And I, the mother who had dedicated her life to protecting the country, didn't even know he needed me? I blamed myself for the months and years of sending only money, believing that was enough for him to have a good life. But now, all I wanted was to get to Michael, to see him, to know he was alive, to know he was okay. The cab pulled up to the entrance of St. Mary's Hospital, the midday sun blinding me as I stepped out.
I paid the driver, dragged my suitcase inside, and tried to steady my breathing so I wouldn't collapse under the panic threatening to take over. The lobby of St. Mary's Hospital was crowded. Voices, footsteps, the loudspeaker calling patients. It all blended into chaotic music. I walked straight to the reception desk where a young nurse was flipping through files. "I'm looking for Michael Miller," I said, my voice dry, each word costing me enormous effort. The nurse glanced up, looked at me briefly, and then quickly scanned the papers in front of her. "He's in intensive care, 5th floor, room 512. She answered in a mechanical tone, as if it were just another routine case. I didn't even have time to thank her. I rushed to the elevator. "Please, hold the door," I called out as I saw it about to close. A middle-aged man reached his hand out to stop it and waited for me to step inside the narrow cab. The pungent smell of disinfectant hit me hard, and I had to fight the urge to gag. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, the ICU corridor stretched cold and silent, broken only by the steady beeping of medical machines. My old military boots echoed with a dull thud on the tiled floor as I walked quickly. Room 512's door was slightly ajar, a white light spilling out from inside. I hesitated for just a second before pushing it open, slowly, as if afraid to break something fragile. Michael was there. On the white bed, surrounded by tubes and machines, his eyes closed, his face pale, so thin I barely recognized him. The respirator pressed against his mouth, each weak breath forcing me to hold mine just to hear it. My heart clenched. That wasn't my Michael, not the boy who ran behind me on the beach, not the man who hugged me tightly each time I returned from a mission. This was only a shadow, a broken version of my son. A doctor stood in the corner of the room, his badge reading, Dr. Harris. He was checking the monitors with a focused but cold expression. He turned to me. "Are you family of the patient?" I nodded, my voice breaking. "I'm his mother, Catherine Miller." He gave a slight nod, gesturing toward Michael. "He has advanced stomach cancer, terminal stage. The situation is very serious. If it had been treated earlier, maybe it could have been different." His voice was flat, as if he were describing any other case, but every word cut into my chest like a knife. "Cancer. Terminal stage," I repeated, my voice trembling, not believing what I was hearing. An hour earlier, I had imagined hugging him, listening to him tell me about the days I had missed. I thought I'd see him healthy, smiling. Not like this, trapped among lifeless machines. How did this happen? Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked, almost pleading. Dr. Harris shook his head, a flicker of compassion in his eyes. "No one has come to see him since he was admitted. We tried to contact the family, but it wasn't possible. No one came." The words struck me like a blow. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, The one I had trusted to care for Michael? Where was she? I remembered Mrs. Thompson's words, the social media post, the yacht, the parties. Rage burned inside me, but the pain drowned it. I stepped closer to the bed and took Michael's cold hand. His skin was thin as paper, the blue veins showing through. "Michael, it's Mom," I whispered, holding back tears. "I'm here now, son." Suddenly, his lips moved, his eyelids trembled, and he opened his eyes. They were clouded, but there was still a familiar glow inside. "Mom?" he murmured so weakly I had to lean down to hear him. "Mom, I love you." Before he could finish, the heart monitor gave out a long, piercing beep that cut through the air. I clutched his hand. "Michael! No, son!" I screamed, but Dr. Harris pulled me aside, calling for the nurses. "Out, please, let us work," he ordered firmly. They pulled me into the hallway. I stared out the window as nurses rushed in and machines beeped urgently, voices mixing together. I covered my face, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please don't take him," I repeated, as if those words could hold him here. But minutes later, Dr. Harris came out. He pulled off his gloves and shook his head. "I'm very sorry. We did everything we could." I felt hollow inside. My legs gave way, and I stumbled out of the ICU without daring to look at the white sheet now covering my son's face. Michael was gone. Just when I had finally returned, I hadn't even been able to tell him how much I loved him or how sorry I was for leaving him alone. I stood in the hallway under the harsh, cold light, feeling an immense void, as if the entire world had collapsed. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and dialed Melissa's number. On the other end, I heard loud music, laughter, voices. It sounded like she was in the middle of a party. "What is it?" Melissa answered, her tone flat, with not the slightest trace of concern. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Michael is dead." There was a brief silence. Then she replied as casually as if she were talking about the weather. "Oh, I'm busy. We'll talk later." The call ended. I froze, my phone slipping from my hand, clattering onto the floor. Melissa hadn't asked anything. She hadn't shown the slightest sadness. She was out celebrating while my son had just taken his last breath. I turned and walked out of the hospital. Outside, the sun was still shining, but all I felt was cold. A bone-deep cold. I had lost Michael, and now I realized I had also lost the only person I once called family, Melissa, whom I had trusted with my son, had betrayed us in the cruelest way. I pushed through the hospital doors. The midday sunlight hit my face, but inside I felt nothing but emptiness. My legs were heavy, each step a struggle to keep from collapsing. I don't remember how long I walked, only that eventually I reached the administrative office to handle Michael's death certificate. The word death hammered in my mind like a sledgehammer, crushing whatever hope remained. My son, the boy I raised, the one I loved with all my heart, was now reduced to a document, a stamp, a name on a hospital file. A young nurse with her hair tied up in a high ponytail handed me a clear plastic bag. She said, "These are Mr. Miller's belongings." Her voice hurried with the routine of her shift. I took the bag with shaking hands and peered through the plastic. Inside were Michael's wristwatch, his worn leather wallet I had given him on his 20th birthday, and his cracked phone. I opened the wallet, searching for something personal, some trace of the life he had lived, but it was empty. Only his documents remained, and an old photo with wrinkled corners. Michael and I at the beach. He was just a little boy then, smiling brightly, holding a red kite. I pressed the photo against my chest, as if letting go would erase his memory. I also asked Dr. Harris for Michael's complete medical file.
A few minutes later, he returned with a thick folder. "Here's everything," he said, setting the stack of papers on the table. I flipped through the pages: admission dates, test results, the final diagnosis: terminal gastric cancer with metastasis. My vision blurred. Dr. Harris lowered his voice. If he had been brought in a few months ago, he could have lived 1 or 2 more years, but when he was admitted, it was already too late. I nodded silently, my chest tightening. 1 or 2 more years. If I had been home, if I had paid closer attention, if I hadn't let Melissa take charge of everything, Michael might have had a chance. I asked the nurse on duty who was listed as the primary contact person, my voice hoarse. She checked her notes. Melissa Lopez. We called her several times, sent messages, but we were never able to reach her. I froze, as if slapped in the face. Melissa, the same woman I had sent money to every month, the one I trusted to care for Michael, had not shown up. She had not only abandoned my son, but had also ignored the hospital when they tried to contact her. My fists clenched, my nails digging into my palms until I felt a sting. At that moment, Michael's phone vibrated inside the plastic bag. The screen lit up with the name Melissa. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to answer, to scream at her, to ask how she could be so cruel. But I didn't. I couldn't face her cold voice. Not after everything. I let it ring until the screen went dark. Then I put the bag in my purse and walked out of the administrative office. I made my way to the morgue, where Michael had been taken to be prepared for the funeral. An attendant handed me a form to sign for his transfer to the military funeral home. "Are you okay?" he asked, noticing my shaking hand as I scrawled an unsteady signature. I nodded, but I wasn't okay. How could I be, when I had just lost my only son? When I finally stepped outside the hospital, I let the tears fall freely. I stood on the sidewalk, the sun burning my shoulders, but I felt nothing but pain. Pain for Michael, for enduring his last days alone, without his mother at his side, without anyone to hold his hand. I blamed myself for the years I spent consumed by work, by missions around the world. I thought sending money was enough. I thought Melissa would take care of him. But I had been wrong. The greatest mistake of my life was leaving my son in her hands. And now, in the midst of grief and regret, Melissa's image haunted me. Her sharp voice over the phone, the blaring music, the laughter on that yacht. She had spent my money, the money I sent to care for Michael, on luxury parties while he was fighting for his life. She had not only abandoned him, but she had been indifferent when she learned he was gone. That cruelty was like a knife twisting inside me, filling me with both sorrow and rage. I wanted to scream, to confront her, to ask why she had treated Michael that way, but I knew the time wasn't right. I needed to stay calm. I needed to do what was best for my son, even if he wasn't here anymore. I pulled out my phone and dialed Colonel James Carter, an old friend from the Marines who now worked in the Military Financial Administration Agency. "James, I need to see you today," I said firmly, though tears were still streaming down my cheeks. "Catherine, what's going on? Are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "I'll explain when I see you. Please, arrange an urgent appointment." James immediately agreed and told me to come to his office later that afternoon. I hung up, feeling like I had found a small point of support in the storm that was consuming me.
That evening, I took a cab back to Michael's house at 420 Palm Street. Sitting in the back seat, I clutched my father's pocket watch, the one I had carried for more than 40 years, its cold metal pressing into my palm like a reminder of the promise I had once made: always come back home. But now I knew I had come back too late. Standing in front of Michael's door, I felt the ring of keys tremble in my hand as I searched for the right one. My fingers brushed against a small, icy key, the one I had kept all these years, a fragile thread connecting me to my son. When I finally opened the door, the smell of dampness and neglect hit me, as if the house itself had been abandoned long ago. I flipped the switch. A dim yellow light revealed a room in disarray. Wine glasses with dried stains scattered on the table, dust covering the furniture, empty takeout boxes piled on the floor. I froze, staring around. This had been Michael's home, the place I thought he shared with Melissa in happiness. But now, it was nothing but chaos, like my heart in that moment. Dragging my suitcase, I left it by the old couch and walked to Michael's desk in the corner. A brown envelope lay among scattered papers. I opened it, and my heart pounded as I flipped through the receipts inside. One read clearly, Yacht rental, Gulf of Mexico, $150,000, paid with Michael Miller's credit card. The date was from last week, when he was already in the ICU. The next was worse. Cartier jewelry, $195,000, 3 days ago. I gripped the paper so hard my nails dug into my palms. Melissa had used Michael's money, the money I sent for his care, to rent yachts and buy jewelry while he lay dying in a hospital bed. I pulled out my phone and photographed each receipt, every figure, every date, saving them in a separate folder. Each click was a stab in my chest, but I couldn't stop. I needed proof. I needed the truth to confront Melissa. Then I opened the video call app and dialed her number. The screen lit up, and there she was, Melissa, standing on the deck of a yacht, the deep blue sea behind her, her friends laughing loudly. She wore a silk dress with a giant Chanel logo across her chest, expensive sunglasses on her face, and a cocktail in her hand. The sight was a slap to my face. "What is it?" she asked, her tone distracted, as if I were bothering her. I took a deep breath, my voice calm, though inside I was burning. "You know Michael is dead, and yet you stand there as if nothing happened." Her face froze for a second. Her lips pressed together. Then she shrugged. "I already knew. He'd been sick for a long time. There was nothing I could do. Dying was just a matter of time." She said it softly, like it was nothing. Not the death of her husband. Not my son. My blood boiled. "Do you think I don't know where the money went? The money I sent for Michael's care? Yachts, jewelry, parties. I've seen the statements, Melissa." She raised her eyebrow, a mocking smile spreading across her face. "That money is mine too. We're family, aren't we?" That word, family, was the final stab. She dared to call this betrayal family after letting Michael die alone. I stared at her through the screen, my voice steel. "This is the last party you'll pay for with my money." I hung up before she could reply. My hands shook, not from fear, but from rage burning inside me. I couldn't let her go on. I couldn't let her cruelty pass unchecked. I dialed Colonel James Carter again. He answered on the first ring. "James, I need your help," he said. "What's going on? What happened?" His voice was worried, but I didn't have time for explanations. "I'm coming to your office now. Please have the paperwork ready." An hour later, I was sitting in James Carter's office. The room smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. I laid a stack of receipts on his desk along with the financial power of attorney Michael had signed for me before my last mission. Melissa spent Michael's money, the money I sent for his care, to buy these things. I pushed the papers toward him. James went through them one by one, his brow furrowed. "What do you want me to do?" he asked.
Freeze Michael's accounts immediately. Cancel all linked credit cards. Transfer the remaining balance to me. James didn't hesitate. He knew me well. He knew how I acted when things had gone too far. Within 20 minutes, the paperwork was done. "It's all set," he said, handing me a document. "The account is blocked, the cards are canceled, and the remaining balance has been transferred to your name." I nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly, though the pain remained sharp and constant. As I left his office, my phone began vibrating nonstop. Melissa was calling again and again. I didn't answer. But soon, text messages and voice notes poured in. First, her voice filled with rage. "What the hell did you do with the account? Do you think you have the right to ruin my life?" Then her tone shifted, turning pleading. "Catherine, please, can we talk? I didn't mean any harm. I just needed the money to get by. Please reopen the account. I'm sorry." I listened to every word, but not a single one mentioned Michael. Not a single apology for abandoning him. She only thought of herself. I gripped my father's pocket watch tightly. Its cold metal reminded me I had to stay strong. When I stepped back outside, the Miami sun was just as bright, but inside me, a storm raged.
That night, I returned to Michael's house on Palm Street, determined to find every piece of evidence I could against Melissa. The place felt even colder now, as if the walls themselves held the weight of betrayal. I unpacked Michael's scattered papers, stacking them neatly on the dining table. My hands trembled as I opened drawers and sifted through folders. And then, in the corner of the desk, I found it. An old leather notebook, worn at the edges, the strap hanging loose. When I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. Inside were Michael's handwritten notes, amounts of money he had given to Melissa, each one dated and signed. $30,000, March. Melissa said it was for medicine. $50,000, April. Melissa said she needed it to fix the house. Page after page, I read the same pattern. Melissa had asked Michael for money under false pretenses: medicine, house repairs, hospital bills. But the bank statements I had seen told the truth. Luxury stores, yacht rentals, jewelry. She hadn't just wasted my money. She had deceived my son, making him believe she was caring for the family. I sank into the chair, clutching the notebook as tears welled in my eyes. This was more than proof. It was Michael's own testimony, a silent record of betrayal he had endured alone. "Michael, I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I didn't know what you went through." But in the midst of grief, a spark of determination lit inside me. This notebook was the missing piece, the one thing that could force Melissa to face her guilt. I placed it carefully inside a cardboard box, alongside the receipts, bank statements, and every document I had collected. Then I closed the lid and whispered to myself, "This isn't over, Michael. I will protect you, even if you're gone." The next morning, I carried the box to a small office I still had access to at the old Marine base. The fourth floor was plain, just a wooden desk, a few metal chairs, and the smell of salt water drifting through the window. I laid out the contents of the box one by one across the desk. Receipts, bank statements, Michael's notebook. Each paper was a fragment of the truth, and I knew I had to arrange them carefully, like a weapon of justice. One by one, I scanned every document using an old military scanner I had kept during classified missions.
3 copies, one on the base's internal drive, one on an external hard disk, and one in an encrypted cloud service I used during classified missions. Each press of the save button felt like placing another brick in the wall of justice I was building for my son. When I finished, I stared at Michael's phone, still sealed in the plastic bag from the hospital. I powered it on. Most of the messages were deleted, but I didn't stop there. I checked other apps, and luckily, I managed to recover fragments of a group chat. Melissa had posted a photo of a Louis Vuitton bag with a message, "Just bought this with Michael's money. He won't live much longer anyway. Oh well." I read it over and over. Every word cut into me like a blade. Melissa hadn't just taken advantage of Michael. She had treated his illness, his death, as her opportunity. I clenched the phone in my hand, rage trembling through me. And then I opened his email account, using the old password we once shared for family accounts. In the sent folder, I found a booking confirmation for a luxury cruise, paid with my military account card. The note at the bottom read, "Use Catherine's card. She won't be leaving the base anytime soon, and if she comes back, she'll have to tell us first." I dropped into the chair, my head in my hands. Melissa hadn't just betrayed Michael. She had planned everything, knowing I was away serving my country, knowing I couldn't supervise. She had exploited both of us. By the afternoon, I drove to Colonel Carter's office again, the box of evidence in hand. "Catherine, what did you find?" he asked gravely. I placed the box on his desk and pulled out the files and USB drive. Here it is. Receipts, bank statements, messages, emails. Melissa drained Michael's accounts even while he was in the hospital. James looked through some of the papers, nodding grimly. "This is more than enough to pursue financial charges. Do you want to go further?" I nodded, my voice steady. "I want her to pay, not just for the money, for what she did to Michael." He placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Then I'll guide you through filing this in court, but you'll need a good lawyer before we proceed." He handed me a name, Robert Collins, a well-known attorney specializing in family financial abuse cases. I called him immediately. His voice was deep and calm. "Mrs. Miller, I can see you tomorrow morning. Bring all the evidence. We'll go through it carefully." "Thank you," I whispered. For the first time in days, I felt like I had found an ally. That evening, back at Michael's house, I sat at the dining table, the box of evidence sealed beside me. On the other side lay my father's pocket watch, its scratched glass glinting under the lamp. I ran my fingers over it softly and whispered, "Michael, I won't let your death be in vain." I knew then Melissa had chosen the wrong person to betray. Early the next morning, I walked into Robert Collins's law office in downtown Miami, carrying the heavy box of evidence under my arm. The building was modest, tucked between low-rise offices. The smell of paper and ink filled the air as soon as I stepped inside. Robert rose from behind his desk to greet me, a man in his 40s, sharp-eyed, with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Miller," he said warmly but seriously, "please have a seat." I set the box on the table and opened it, carefully laying out the folders I had prepared: bank statements, receipts, text messages, and Michael's leather notebook. "This is everything I have," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Proof of what Melissa did." Robert nodded and began reviewing the documents. His eyes scanned quickly, occasionally stopping to underline figures or jot notes with a red pencil. Luxury yacht rentals, jewelry purchases, withdrawals that match no household expenses. And these notes from Michael, dated, signed. This isn't just financial misuse, Mrs. Miller. This is exploitation. I sat silently watching him work, my heart pounding. It felt like I was handing over pieces of my soul. Robert finally looked up, pushing his glasses higher. "Do you have the notarized financial power of attorney?" "Yes," I said, pulling it from my bag. "Michael signed it before my last deployment." He examined the document carefully and nodded. "Good. This is the key. It proves you had legal oversight over his finances. With this, we can request an emergency freeze of Melissa's access to all assets." He flipped through more pages, stopping at a bank statement. $100,000 for a birthday yacht party, the same day Michael was admitted to intensive care? He shook his head. "I've seen many cases of financial abuse, but this is deliberate cruelty." His words echoed my own thoughts. After nearly an hour, Robert closed the folders and leaned back. His gaze met mine, sharp yet empathetic. "This case has enough weight to take to court. We will request an immediate freeze on all assets, and you will be granted provisional control over Michael's estate. I believe the judge will be on our side." I swallowed hard, clutching my father's pocket watch. For the first time, I felt a faint glimmer of justice. "She's on a yacht in the Gulf of Mexico," I added quietly, firmly. "I have her location thanks to a friend." Robert gave a cold smile. His voice sharpened. "She has no idea how quickly the law can move. She thinks she can hide at sea forever, but the law doesn't wait." That afternoon, we went to the Miami-Dade County Courthouse to file the petition. The air smelled of paper and ink, printers buzzing. A weary clerk stamped our documents and confirmed the hearing. "It will be held within 72 hours, she said. I nodded, thanking her, though my chest felt heavy. Every step was for Michael, yet each reminded me that he was no longer here. Later that day, I visited the military funeral home to finalize arrangements. Michael's uniform was ready, dark blue, the same style I had once worn with pride, a small medal gleaming under the light. The funeral director, an old veteran, rested his hand on my shoulder. "He'll be buried with full honors, Colonel Miller," he said gravely. I nodded, unable to speak, staring at the folded uniform. I imagined Michael wearing it, and my heart ached. He should have been alive, smiling at my side, not lying in silence. When I returned to Michael's house, night had fallen. A white envelope lay on the floor just inside the door. I picked it up and unfolded the handwritten note. "Catherine, we can settle this between us. I just need money to pay my debts. Please don't take this too far. Melissa." I read it twice. Every word felt like a slap. No apology, no mention of Michael, no sorrow, just money. I folded the note, slipped it into the evidence folder, and didn't reply. Melissa no longer deserved a single word from me.
The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror inside Michael's house, dressed in my navy blue marine dress uniform. I hadn't worn it in years. The medals on my chest glimmered faintly in the morning light, each one a memory of battles fought. But today, I wasn't wearing it for glory. I was wearing it for Michael. I tightened my grip around my father's pocket watch and whispered to myself, "I'm here, son. I won't let you down." The Miami-Dade County Courthouse was wide and cold, its fluorescent lights casting a stark glow over everything. The smell of old wood and damp benches hung heavy in the air. I walked in clutching the thick file of evidence to my chest. At my side was Robert Collins, sharp and calm, his gaze fixed on the front of the courtroom. On the other side, Melissa was already seated. She wore a tight Gucci dress, her hair curled perfectly, heavy makeup masking her face. In her hand was the latest iPhone, and though she lowered her head as if tired, I could see through her act.
She was pretending to be a victim. The judge, a stern middle-aged man, called the session to order. Robert stood first, placing the heavy file on the table. His voice rang firm. "Your Honor, we present clear evidence of financial abuse and abandonment of responsibility toward Mrs. Melissa Lopez, toward her husband, Mr. Michael Miller." He opened the file, projecting statements onto the large screen. Yacht rentals, luxury dinners, Cartier jewelry, all while Michael Ray in intensive care. Then he produced receipts showing duplicate withdrawals. Finally, photos from Melissa's own social media, smiling on a yacht, champagne in hand, while Michael was only miles away dying in a hospital bed. Each image was a knife to my heart. I remembered Michael's weak voice, "Mom, I love you," and the long, final beep of the heart monitor. Melissa hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen my son's last days. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, holding back tears. Melissa's lawyer, a young man in a shiny suit, rose to respond. "Your Honor, these expenses fall under Mrs. Lopez's legal rights as Mr. Miller's wife. Furthermore, Mr. Miller's illness was irreversible. My client cannot be held responsible." His words were smooth, but Melissa avoided my gaze. She knew the truth and she couldn't hide it for long. Then Robert called the first witness, Dr. Harris. The doctor stepped forward, his voice grave but steady. If Mr. Miller had been admitted earlier and received proper care, he could have lived another 1 or 2 years, but no one contacted us. No one visited during the 2 weeks he was in the ICU. The courtroom fell silent. Melissa lowered her head, clutching her iPhone tightly as though trying to hide her shame. Then the judge looked at me. "Mrs. Miller, you may speak." I rose slowly, my uniform heavy but giving me strength. I faced Melissa, then turned to the judge. My voice trembled, but I held it firm. I was absent because I was serving my country. I sent money trusting that my son was being cared for, but no one has the right to use my absence as an excuse to let my son die alone. When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Only the soft scratching of the court clerk's pen could be heard. Melissa kept her head down, but I saw no regret in her eyes. The judge leaned forward, reviewing the evidence one last time. Then he struck the gavel. "The court orders the freezing of all assets belonging to Mr. Michael Miller. Provisional control of the estate is granted to Mrs. Catherine Miller. Mrs. Melissa Lopez is prohibited from accessing the assets or the residence until further notice." The sound of the gavel was sharp and final, like the end of an ordeal. Melissa shot up, her face red with rage. "You'll regret this, Catherine. You can't do this to me." Her shrill voice echoed off the walls, but the court officers quickly moved in, escorting her out. I watched her Gucci dress sweep through the doorway as she screamed, and for the first time, I felt a small piece of justice had been done. But it didn't ease the pain. Michael was still gone, and Melissa's cruelty was a scar that would never heal. I gathered the documents carefully, placing them back in the case. As I stepped outside, the Miami sun struck my uniform, the metals glinting brightly. But I felt no pride, no triumph, only a quiet, heavy relief that at least I had kept my promise to Michael.
After the trial, I walked straight to the bank carrying the court's resolution. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, reviewed the paperwork carefully. "Mrs. Miller, all of Michael Miller's assets have been transferred to your name," she said softly. "How would you like to manage these funds?" I took a deep breath. My voice was firm. "I want to divide it. Half will go to my personal account. The other half will be used to create a nonprofit foundation, the Michael Fund." Her brows rose in surprise, but she nodded and began typing the paperwork. The idea had been born the day I saw Michael's uniform ready at the funeral home. I wanted his name to become a symbol of hope, something that would outlive the pain, something that would turn his suffering into light for others. That same week, the Michael Fund was officially registered with the U.S. Department of Social Services. I reached out to St. Mary's Hospital and other clinics requesting a list of cancer patients abandoned by their families or unable to afford treatment. One of the doctors who had cared for Michael took my hand and said, "You're doing something truly meaningful, Mrs. Miller. We'll help you in every way we can." In just the first week, the Michael Fund covered medication costs for 12 patients. I also signed a contract with a mobile clinic to bring healthcare to remote areas of the Appalachian region and the Ozark Mountains, where many like Michael had been forgotten. A few weeks later, I drove to Texas Children's Hospital in Houston to review the cases we were helping. The hallways smelled of disinfectant, the beeping of machines stirring painful memories. In the oncology ward, I saw a boy sitting curled up in bed, clutching a worn-out teddy bear, his big eyes staring out the window. He looked about 8 years old, thin and pale from chemotherapy. The doctor introduced us. "This is Daniel. He lost his parents in a car accident. He has leukemia and lives alone here in the hospital." I sat beside his bed and gave him a gentle smile. "Hello, Daniel. What are you doing?" He looked up, his voice faint. "I don't want to die. I just want a family." His words cut straight into my heart. His clear eyes, filled with sadness, reminded me of Michael when he was little, when he would hug me and ask when I'd come home. I took his tiny, cold hand in mine. "You're not alone, Daniel. I'm here." The doctor told me Daniel had a chance to recover if he received continuous treatment and proper care. Without hesitation, I pledged the Michael Fund to cover all his medical expenses, and I also hired a private nurse to look after him. Weeks passed. I returned to Houston carrying a bag of fresh oranges and a children's book. Daniel had lost most of his hair, but his eyes shone brighter. For the first time, I saw him smile. I sat at his bedside, telling him stories of rowing across the Gulf of Mexico, of sunsets painting the water in fire. Daniel listened wide-eyed, hugging his teddy bear. "Mrs. Miller," he asked curiously, "were you ever afraid at sea?" I smiled, stroking his head. "Of course, but I learned that no matter how big the waves are, if you hold on tight to the oar, you'll always reach the other side." Every visit, I brought his favorite food: homemade flan, mango juice, chocolate cookies. Spoon by spoon, I helped him eat, wiping his mouth when it spilled. Those moments felt like I was caring for Michael again, like I was being given back a piece of what I had lost. One afternoon, as I prepared to leave, Daniel held my hand with hesitant eyes. "Mrs. Miller, can you be my grandma?" The world seemed to stop. His clear eyes looked straight into mine, and I saw Michael's reflection. My heart softened, healed in a way I hadn't thought possible. I pulled him into my arms, tears rolling down my cheeks. "Of course, Daniel, I'll be your grandma." He hugged me tightly, his teddy bear squished between us, his frail body warm against mine. That same day, I began the paperwork for legal guardianship. I contacted the Department of Social Services, prepared documents, and arranged a small bedroom in Michael's house. I painted the walls navy blue, Daniel's favorite color, because it reminded him of the sky. I bought a bed, a nightstand, and placed his teddy bear on the pillow. Every brushstroke, every piece of furniture was a promise. You will never be alone again.
6 months after the trial, I received a call from Texas Children's Hospital. The doctor's voice carried a rare brightness. "Mrs. Miller, I have good news. Daniel has responded well to treatment. His latest tests show no cancer cells." For a moment, I stood frozen in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear as tears rolled down my cheeks. Daniel, the boy I had first seen curled up in that hospital bed, now had a real chance to live. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm on my way." I packed a small gift, a knitted navy blue hat I had made for him. When I arrived at the hospital, Daniel was waiting at the entrance, thin but glowing, hugging his teddy bear. The moment he saw me, he ran into my arms with a radiant smile. "Grandma!" he shouted, his laughter carrying through the air. I held him tight, feeling the warmth of his small body. In that moment, I saw Michael's shadow again, but softer, like a light returning to my heart. From then on, our lives became one. Daniel and I moved into Michael's house, which I began to transform into a real home for both of us. Our first dinner together was simple. Tacos, Daniel's favorite. He placed his teddy bear next to Michael's framed photo on the mantel and looked at me shyly. "Grandma, do you think Uncle Michael would have liked me?" I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Of course, Daniel. Michael would be so proud of you." His eyes lit up as he laughed, salsa dripping down his chin. I wiped his mouth, my heart swelling with a quiet joy I thought I'd never feel again. As the weeks passed, I painted the living room in warm sand tones and filled the terrace with bougainvilleas that danced in the Miami breeze. In the backyard, I strung up a hammock where Daniel liked to read or watch the sunset. Michael's things, his books, his jackets, old photos, I stored carefully in a wooden chest, not to forget him, but to preserve his memory. Every time I touched his favorite jacket, I whispered, "You're still here, aren't you?" The Michael Fund continued to grow, helping dozens of patients receive treatment in rural areas of the U.S. Daniel often sat at the table doing homework while I sorted through reports. Sometimes he drew pictures of the two of us, me in a Marine uniform, him holding his teddy bear, the Gulf of Mexico behind us. "This is us, Grandma," he'd say proudly, handing me the drawing. "We're a team." Once a month, I took Daniel with me to volunteer trips, delivering food and supplies to communities supported by the fund. He ran with the other children, handing out small gifts with a glowing smile. "Grandma, can I bring more candy next time?" he asked, once a pack of cookies in his hand. "Of course," I answered, ruffling his hair. He giggled, and I felt Michael's presence in that laughter, as if my son were watching over us. Life began to soften. In the mornings, I joined a senior kayak group at Miami Harbor, rowing across gentle waves, the salt air on my face. Sometimes Daniel sat on the shore, waving and shouting, "Row faster, Grandma! A fish is chasing you!" I laughed out loud, my heart lighter than it had been in years. In the afternoons, Daniel and I tended the small garden behind the house, tomatoes, herbs, sunflowers. The first harvest filled a basket, and that night we made pasta with fresh tomato sauce. "This is better than tacos, Grandma," he exclaimed, with his mouth full. I smiled, stroking his hair. For the first time in years, happiness felt simple, real. But not everything was peaceful. Robert Collins called one morning. "Catherine, Melissa has filed another motion. She's trying to reclaim assets again. Don't worry. The judge rejected it. Everything is still under your control." I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone. Melissa's shadow still lingered. She hadn't given up. But I didn't let her steal another ounce of my peace. I stopped answering her messages, stopped wasting even a second on her. Daniel was my life now. One day, Daniel came running home from school, a diploma in his hand, his smile brighter than the Florida sun. "Grandma, I got the highest grade in class," he shouted, jumping with joy. I hugged him tightly, the pocket watch of my father warm in my hand. "Well done, Daniel," I whispered. His laughter filled the garden, mixing with the sound of the ocean breeze. For the first time, I felt truly at home, not in a house of bricks and wood, but in a home built of love, where Michael's spirit lived on in every moment we shared.
Months passed, and for the first time in years, peace began to take root in my life. Daniel was thriving, his hair slowly growing back, his laughter filling every corner of the house. The Michael Fund expanded, helping patients across the Appalachian towns and the Ozark communities, saving lives that might otherwise have been forgotten. But Melissa had not disappeared. One afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang.
I opened the door to find a court officer holding an envelope. Another petition. Melissa was once again trying to reclaim Michael's estate. I clenched the papers in my hand, my anger flaring. But this time, I didn't feel despair. I felt resolve. The next morning, I walked into Miami-Dade County Courthouse once more, Robert Collins by my side. Melissa sat at the plaintiff's table, draped in another designer dress, her lawyer whispering in her ear. But her face was different now, strained, desperate. Robert presented the updated files, Melissa's lavish spending, her absence during Michael's illness, her cruel text messages. He added the final piece, Michael's handwritten notebook listing every dollar he had given her, juxtaposed with receipts proving her lies. The judge read the pages slowly, his face hardening. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Lopez," he said, his voice stern, "the evidence presented is undeniable. This court not only upholds the freeze on assets, but orders that you be permanently barred from accessing any part of Michael Miller's estate. Furthermore, your actions constitute financial exploitation. Civil penalties will apply." The gavel struck. Melissa's face flushed with rage. She stood, pointing at me, her voice shrill. "You ruined my life, Catherine. This isn't over." But no one listened. Court officers escorted her out, her shouts fading into the hallway. I exhaled deeply, clutching my father's pocket watch. For the first time, Melissa's shadow no longer loomed over me. Justice had been served. That evening, I returned home to find Daniel waiting on the porch, holding his teddy bear. "How did it go, Grandma?" he asked. I knelt down, stroking his hair. "It's over, Daniel. She can't hurt us anymore." His smile spread wide, and he hugged me tightly. The months that followed were filled with quiet joy. Daniel grew stronger, his school reports filled with praise. On weekends, we cooked together, tacos, pasta, and his new favorite, blueberry pancakes. The Michael Fund reached dozens more patients, sending mobile clinics into remote valleys and mountain towns. Each time I signed a grant approval, I felt Michael's spirit close by, as if he were guiding me. One evening, Daniel ran into the living room holding a drawing. It showed the two of us standing by the sea, me in my Marine uniform, him with his teddy bear. Above us, written in uneven letters, "Family forever." I hugged him, tears in my eyes. "Yes, Daniel, family forever." On the anniversary of Michael's passing, Daniel and I walked to the shoreline near Miami Harbor. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and pink. I carried Michael's photo in my hand, Daniel holding a small bouquet of flowers. We stood together as the waves touched our feet. I whispered into the wind, "Michael, your name lives on. In this boy, in this home, in the lives saved by your fund, you will never be forgotten." Daniel slipped his hand into mine. "Grandma, do you think Uncle Michael can see us?" I smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "Yes, Daniel, he sees us, and he's proud of us." We let the flowers float on the waves, watching as the tide carried them away. The horizon glowed, endless and calm. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not because the pain had vanished, but because love had given it meaning. I had kept my promise. I had come back home.